Norman Solomon, a tremendous debt of
Yeah.
gratitude and apology. Okay, so we're coming up in. Hey, everybody, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. I know I've been gone a minute, but I am back, everybody. Had a couple of health challenges, but I am back, roaring back. And boy, when I go away, what happens? So much has happened. So much has happened, but we're going to talk about a few things today that I really feel, and I think that you feel, just judging by your interactions on social media, are really important. So let's deal with this first issue, top of mind, on the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Let me give my love to Chad and Brett and my whole family there for being so understanding in this moment, at this moment, and during this moment of my own life. But let's get right to it, everybody. Let's talk about President Biden and the book Original Sin, which is already a bestseller. It's already a bestseller. Jake Tapper and I'm an Axios reporter have have uncovered what we've been discussing for years now: the obvious cognitive decline of President Joe Biden. And I let me start off my remarks by extending my most heartfelt prayers and love to the Biden family, who, even with my political disagreements with them, we've known them a long time and they have been friends. And we understand now that President Biden has a very aggressive form of prostate cancer. This is the number two killer of men, American men. And so this is not something that is inconsequential. I know that God is a healer. I'm a woman of faith, you know that, and I pray that he will be healed, and I pray that he will have physical comfort, and I pray that his family will have spiritual comfort. And so it's tough to have this discussion at this time, but it's a discussion that we've got to have. We've got to have it because we were lied to. And a lot of the people who participated in the dishonesty are writing the books now. The greatest bulldogs for the administration, Jake Tapper. They even have mashups on social media in which he would go after Lara Trump. You don't have to like the Trumps, but she was speaking to the president's obvious cognitive decline. He said to Dean Phillips, congressman, who was running for president at the time, well, you know, a lot of people don't like you, but some people do, and they don't really like what you're doing to President Biden. What do you say about that? While he's running, while he's really trying to give us another lane during the primary season. We were not allowed to, the Democratic Party eliminated the primary season just to open the door for the president, who they all knew was in cognitive decline. Everybody knew it. Washington thrives on gossip, everybody. I've lived there. I went to college there. I know it. I've had two brothers in Congress. My father's run for president. I get it. I get it. I get it. Trust me. I've been in the room for a minute and we all saw it. You don't have to be in the room to see what we saw. People speculated about this. And so Ruth's action said, you know what, President Biden, we're going to take you up on your word. You said you'll be a transitional president, which is one term. So what we need you to do, because we are in a moment in which we have a former president who is still very popular, who could be well on his way to winning another chance at the presidency. And we are afraid of what that might portend. They were called blasphemers. Well, Norman Solomon and Jeff Cohen, that always happens with them. But it was wrong. And they were assailed. They were attacked as they were trying to protect us and help us. So I want to know what your thoughts are. Hey, easy peasy, Paula. Hey, Bernadette, everybody. The Rainbow Push Convention will be in Chicago, June 12th through the 14th. I'm going to get that information to you, Jeff Cohen and Norman Solomon, because we all need to come together. We have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. But I want everyone to acknowledge what Ruth's Action and Jeff Cohen and Norman Solomon, they stuck their necks out. They stuck their necks out. They didn't get chopped off, but they did take some whacks. As they said, look, we're not attacking you, but we're trying to protect the democratic process. So pardon my extended remarks, but I have to tell you, all of this has been very upsetting to me because you had some people who in goodwill, like Jeff Cohen and Norman Solomon, who said, look, we've got to look at this, everybody, because now you have some people who are on the bench or who want to get on the bench. We need to have a primary season, but the Democratic Party shut it down. No Democratic primary. Think about that, everybody. And now everybody comes back and says, well, we are doing the reporting. You doing the reporting. Now you're releasing the evidence that you already knew. So I bring on Jeff Cohen, and let me just, on behalf of so many people who will not be able to say this to you, my most profound apologies. Now, I believed what you were saying. That's why I brought you on this show. And I felt that what you were doing was very brave and very important. But I know you, fairness and accuracy in reporting, you reported on this, but Roots Action took action and said, hey, we need a primary season and we need to look at what's going on here. Original sin. Oh my goodness. I don't even know where to begin, Jeff Cohen. Yeah. I have been full.
Well, Santita, you don't have anything to apologize for because you were raising the alarm bells that Joe Biden cannot win re-election. We need an open primary. You featured me, you featured Norman Solomon. I think you featured others from Roots Action. Mm-hmm. So you have nothing to apologize for. We began the don'trunjoe.org campaign, later changed the name to stepasidejoe.org. We began it right after the midterm elections of November 2022. And the Democrats in those midterm elections did not do as badly as people thought they would. Mm-hmm. But we pointed out this is proof that the Democratic brand against the extremism of the Republicans, who are denialist about climate change, about abortion, about guns, about even whether the 2020 election was real. You know, you can't allow an extremist party to come back into power. And the Democratic brand was stronger than the Republican brand, but was being dragged down by Joe Biden's numbers. We didn't even raise the issue of age or cognitive decline. All we did was we looked at the polls. We found one poll in New York Times, 95% of Democrats or Democratic leaners below the age of 30 wanted a different candidate than Biden, 95%. You can't get that on whether the globe is round. It's like the polls were, the Democratic Party was saying, we want an open primary. That's what all the polls were saying. But there was only one group that represented all of those Democrats that were being polled, or independents or Democratic leaners, by saying, Joe's got to step aside. We need an open primary. Another reason that rootsaction.org wanted an open primary, and we knew this from the Jesse Jackson campaigns, we knew it from the Bernie Sanders campaigns, even if the progressive candidate doesn't win the nomination, it gets the base of the Democratic Party involved so they can make demands on whoever the eventual nominee is. And that eventual nominee is often strengthened because all sorts of new people, young people, people of color have come into the party. So we wanted an open primary because we knew we had to defeat Trump. And we knew that if Joe Biden was the nominee, we would not be able to defeat Trump. And we said it over and over, and we would be interviewed by mainstream. By the way, you bring up Jake Tapper's hypocrisy. Jake, we sent our news releases to CNN, probably 24 news releases over a period of a year and a half. And they mentioned us once in passing. It got so bad that we had to pay for ads on CNN to get the Don't Run Joe message out on CNN because their journalists would not cover it. When we would talk to New York Times reporters, they would say to us, how come all of these members of Congress, these Democrats, will tell me privately that they don't think Biden can win, that they're scared out of their wits about what will happen to the whole Democratic Party ticket if Biden is at the head of the ticket. But they won't say it on the record. They won't say it publicly. And that was the problem. And we knew that was the problem. So we took out ads. You know, everyone reads The Hill in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's in
It's
all
delivered to every
congressional
congressional office.
Yeah. So we took out full page ads in The Hill. And one of them I'm looking at now, open letter to Democrats in the House and Senate. Evasion is no solution. There's no choice that's now more consequential than whether President Biden will seek a second term. He should be persuaded not to run. And the graphic we had on this ad in The Hill that every Democrat in Washington read, the photograph was a picture of people in well-dressed suits with their heads in the sand. We couldn't get Democratic leaders to say publicly what they were telling New York Times reporters privately, that they thought Joe Biden was going to bring the whole ticket down, the whole party down. And so we were the one group, rootsaction.org, we were the one group that was saying it. You're right. People said we're disloyal, we're divisive, we want to divide up the Democratic Party. But you said it best, Santita. How can a Democratic Party not have open Democratic Party primaries? How can you be a Democratic Party without democratic processes within the party? And so the lessons that we're trying to say this week, now that everyone tells us you're vindicated, and by the way, if I see one more Democrat who was silent for the last 2 years, who now says it was a reckless decision of Joe Biden to seek re-election, it was a disastrous decision of Joe Biden to seek re-election, and not one of them would say that publicly when it mattered. So, you know, people keep telling us how we're vindicated, but the problem in the Democratic Party remains. It's the same problem that affected Reverend Jesse Jackson when he ran for president, Bernie Sanders when he ran for president, that we have a Democratic National Committee that doesn't understand the crisis that we're in. We've got a petition at Roots Action, have an emergency meeting. Don't just have your normal 2 meetings a year when democratic processes, poor people, immigrants, working people are all being thrown under the bus. You've got to have emergency meetings. So we feel that the leadership of the Democratic Party, it's still too much in league with the donors. And by the way, the donors, the big donors to the Democratic Party, they don't particularly care who wins, whether it's a Democrat or Republican. Many of them donate to both.
I need you to state that. I need you to emphasize that, because people, I don't think they really understand how power works. These people are transpartisan. They don't care about a party.
Right. And think about a guy like Reid Hoffman. When Kamala Harris became the nominee, when Biden finally got out of the race months and months too late, and then he anointed Kamala Harris, and she went to her first big fundraiser in San Francisco, and it was co-hosted by Reid Hoffman. Reid Hoffman is a billionaire who also donates to, the Israeli occupation and genocide. But he was demanding of the Democrats that they get rid of probably the best Biden appointee, whose name was Lena Khan. She was the head of the Federal Trade Commission, and she was standing in the way of all these corporate mergers that allows the wealth to gush upward while working people get screwed. And Reid Hoffman said she's got to be replaced. She's got to be replaced. I mean, if a guy like that, who's in league with the Israeli violence and expansionism, and in league with these companies that want to merge and get rid of a good public servant in Lena Khan, who was heading the Federal Trade Commission. That's not the kind of person you want at your fundraiser if you care about progressive change or social justice. But that was the co-host of the fundraiser for Kamala Harris soon after she became the nominee. So yes, we're grappling with a Democratic National Committee that should be saying there cannot be dark money inside Democratic primaries. We know what happened last year. Jamal Bowman in Bronx, Westchester, New York, and
Cori Bush.
Yes, and Corey in St. Louis. They both got defeated when Republican money, AIPAC money, conservative money, billionaire money flooded into their primaries, and the Democratic National Committee didn't say anything.
Well, wait a minute. Let's hold on that point. $20 million was put up to Harper. Oh goodness, my dear friend out of Detroit. He was running for the U.S. Senate seat.
Right, and they offered him money if he would run against Rashida.
$20 million.
Yeah, we will fund your campaign, $20 million.
And what people need to understand is if you don't spend all the campaign money, it goes to you.
Right.
They were willing to give him $20 million to leave a U.S. Senate race to run against Rashida Tlaib. And all of the money that they're flooding into Ilhan Omar's opposition. Right. She's just strong enough, AM 950 radio audience, this is your congressman. She's strong enough to take the hit, and so is Rashida at this time. That can always change. But because they have such deep roots in their community and they're known for service, they've been able to take the hit like Reverend took the hit. You know that. These hits that people are taking now are the same hits that Reverend took in 84 and 88. Well, really, coming out of the Mideast in 79. It's just, thankfully, he was strong enough to take the hits, but the hits never did stop.
Right.
I mean, I just think it's important for people because when you make the assertion that, hey, Joe Biden, look, we're looking at the whole political landscape. We're not picking winners and losers here. What you need to do is move out the way because the polls are saying this. What I think you have to continue to explain, Jeff Cohen, Roots Action co-founder, is that Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos and all these people are going to be at Kamala's inauguration too.
Yeah, that's the problem. It's the billionaire class, the donor class that doesn't particularly care which party is in the White House as long as they get theirs, as long as they get their appointees, as long as they get these regulatory commissions to be weak. So it's sad that we don't have an opposition party. You know, we have the Republicans and they're going to all out fascism and corporatism. And, you know, one of the definitions of fascism is when the corporations and the government are one. And so you have government now by billionaires under Donald Trump. And if we had an opposition party, it would win. You know, if we had an opposition party where the leaders and the base were unified. I mean, the Republicans have that because it's a cult. The base of the party worships Trump and he's the leader of the party. The Democrats have always had this problem where the people that run the party and are in league with the donors are out of step with and afraid of the activist base. You need millions of activists in the Democratic Party in order to win, especially if you're not going to serve big business interests. And so the base of the party has got to be mobilized, honored, and then we could beat these right-wing Republicans in election after election. Maybe we can't beat them in Mississippi, but we could beat them in most states, most cities, and in the nation if we had a Democratic Party leadership that wasn't so afraid of the party base.
But wait a minute, Jeff Cohen, we don't even know if we could beat them in Mississippi. You got outside of Texas, the greatest concentration of African Americans is in Mississippi.
Yeah,
So
that's
wait a
true.
minute. You haven't even tried to register, not you, the Democrats haven't even tried to register them to
Right.
vote.
Oh, you're right. You're right. We don't even know whether some of these states that are considered Republican or red states might become purple and competitive
Yes.
if we had a Democratic Party that wasn't afraid of the base, wasn't afraid of registering poor people, wasn't afraid of mobilizing poor people to the polls. What happened last November? They spent millions and millions of dollars trying to get the moderate Republicans through their millions of dollars of ad spending. I don't think there are any moderate Republicans anymore. But that's where the money goes instead of, hey, what's the natural base of a progressive party? It's Black people, it's brown people, it's immigrant citizens, it's young people, it's activists, it's racial justice activists, it's environmental activists. Let's mobilize all this energy and win for a change. And it's sickening what happened in November. It just sickens me that, it took us so long to get Biden and his disastrous debate performance. And then he anointed Kamala Harris. There was no open primary. There were no demands made on the candidates. The best candidate should have emerged from a competitive primary. That never happened.
And they
we
could
ended
have.
up losing.
Dean Phillips in his first race got 20% of the vote.
Yeah.
I mean, with no publicity, he had gone from 0% name recognition to 20% of the vote. I mean, with a corporate media who ignored him.
Yes.
And then when they brought him on, they vilified him.
Well, and remember the other thing they did. They changed the primaries.
Oh, okay.
They moved the first primary traditionally is in New Hampshire. And in New Hampshire, traditionally, maverick Democrats have done very well. Mm-hmm. Your dad did well. Bernie did well. Senator Eugene McCarthy, who opposed the Vietnam War, just shocked the country when he did so well in the New Hampshire primary back in 1968. So knowing that Biden had done so poorly in New Hampshire in 2020, he came in fifth. He got a grand total of 8%.
And we were asking him to drop out because he continued to do poorly week after week.
Right. But keep in mind that if they had a New Hampshire primary be the first primary, as it always has been, but they were afraid of how Biden would do in New Hampshire. So they pushed New Hampshire aside and they made South Carolina their first primary. It's not a diverse state. There's a lot of African Americans, but it's very much a Republican state. It's got the lowest percentage of unionized workers of any state in the country. If they wanted the first state not to be New Hampshire, but they wanted it to be a more diverse state, they would have made the first primary Georgia, which has a lot of progressive activists, some unions, but they're afraid of that. So they made New Hampshire irrelevant in 2024, and they made the first primary South Carolina, where they felt the Democratic machine could assure that Joe Biden would do well. When you start changing the order of primaries right before the primary season, the fix is in. And this is why, the Democratic National Committee, thankfully, there's some new leaders in there. They're not necessarily progressive leaders, but at least they talk to progressives. But again, the rootsaction.org, we will be monitoring the Democratic National Committee. We'll be attending all of their meetings. We'll be live streaming the meetings. We'll be having expert commentators. I'm sure you will too. But I mean, if we had an opposition party, if we had a Democratic Party in 2024, we would have had an open primary. Biden would have stepped aside and we would have defeated Trump and we wouldn't be in the mess that we're in.
We're talking with Jeff Cohen, rootsaction.org, Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. We're talking about Original Sin. It is already a bestseller. Alex Thompson of Axios and Jake Tapper of CNN have written a book that is explosive, just as Fight has been explosive. You have this rash of books that are coming out that are talking about the campaign, but this book is unique in that it does not skirt around the president's cognitive decline, as we send prayers and love to that family today, as we find that he has a particularly aggressive form of prostate cancer. On the Gleason scale, I just found out what this is. You have a measurement of 6 to 10 for aggressiveness. Well, he's a 9, and it is already metastasized into his bones. So we're praying for President Biden. That having been said, I think we can walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. I think we can send him love and prayers and appreciate, whether you've agreed with his politics or not, we can appreciate his service to the country. I do. And I respect that and I honor that. That having been said, there's some things that he's done. And I would say the party leadership, all of them, because they were all in on it. They knew. You're not going to tell me that you come to a party and you see George Clooney and you cannot recognize him, and this is the first time. There were reports that came out last year, Jeff Cohen, where the staff had come together and they said, okay, we're not going to let him walk out to the helicopter by himself because we're afraid his gait is so labored, he's falling, we're going to surround him. So they started doing that. They knew that. And we know how staff work, particularly staff around someone, a figure who is powerful. The gatekeeper, the chief of staff, is the most important person in Washington, D.C. They're more important than the secretaries because the chief of staff and the chief of staff's assistant, they are the gatekeepers. They determine who the president or who the member in the U.S. Senate or the House of Representatives, they determine who they see. They determine what the priorities are. They will tell a member, they will tell the president, you don't have to pay attention to that. Or, you know what, this is a priority. So the staffs are very empowered. So everybody in that White House had skin in the game, if you will, Jeff Cohen.
Yeah, I think they were saving their own skins. They were so wedded to power, even if it meant jeopardizing the Democratic Party victory. They had their gravy train, they had their position of power, and they performed horribly. And we could go beyond Biden's immediate circle and go to the leadership of the Democrats in the House and the Senate, who said nothing, who didn't even, we now know they didn't even privately talk to Biden that he should step aside.
Even though they knew. I mean, you can't tell me that Obama didn't know. You can't tell me that no one in their circle knew. He let him off the stage, for heaven's sakes, at Radio City Music Hall. And this was not first. He didn't even want him to run in 2020.
Right. That's right. Yeah, we know that.
We know that.
I don't know. I also blame the mainstream media.
Well, let's look at them for a minute, because what to me, part of the hypocrisy here is that you have Jake Tapper of CNN, Alex Thompson of Axios, who have written this blockbuster book. And I read these books because I always like to know who's handled gently and who's criticized in these books, because that to me is an indicator of who the reporters have been talking to or the authors have been talking to, right? Jeff Cohen, I think that's a fair assessment. And this book is written by 2 reporters who knew. They already knew. That's why, I mean, he hasn't been out of office a year. So, and they jumped on top of this story already. So I've got to assume, I know you knew. Yeah. I know that I know that Jake Tapper, who was on television, he was so aggressive in going after people who questioned, and people were not unkind about the president's physical state, his medical condition. We all have older parents if we're blessed enough to have them be older. And we have all seen this in our own lives. Unless you have a heart of stone. I mean, I've got a father who's been so strong, he played Big Ten football. He's in a wheelchair now. That is not funny. That having been said, wait a minute. We know, and now we see this man, he has a late stage aggressive form of cancer. That's come out now. And so now you have all these people on television who are basically ostensibly trying to make us push back on criticizing what happened here. And I'm saying, don't do that. You can send him love and prayers, and you can criticize this to me, Jeff Cohen, at the same time.
Yeah. I guess I'm getting tired of seeing in the mainstream media that Biden made a reckless or disastrous decision to run again, when in those news outlets, they didn't allow debate about it. Mm-mm. In the New York Times, it was peripheral whether Biden should run again. Where was the editorials? Where were the op-ed columns? And CNN, they had virtually no one who was willing to question whether Biden should run again. And as you say, Santita, people that did question it, whether Biden should run again, they were attacked. And I mean, it's great that these Johnny-come-latelys, after Trump is now the president and has been doing so much damage for 4 months, it's great to hear them talk about Biden's disastrous decision, but they helped Biden make that decision through their silence.
They absolutely did. And so I'm just saying, and this is happening at a time when corporate media are more mistrusted than ever before. I need you to help me to criticize this, because with fairness and accuracy and reporting, that is what you have been doing for decades. You've helped us to understand where the funders are, where, the people who come on television and give commentary, what their backgrounds are, and why it's important for you to know that this person is a spokesperson for, say, Big Pharma or the gun industry or whatever, what have you. I want you to help critique. Let's start with Original Sin, because that's the book of the moment. It's already a bestseller. Alex Thompson of Axios, but Jake Tapper in particular, because he not only writes, but he's on television. He's on television. He has a very, very big footprint. And he used his platform to aggressively attack people who questioned the president's medical state. Not his motives.
Right.
His medical state.
Yeah. Well, again, how many guests did Jake Tapper have representing the millions of Democrats in polls who were saying, we want a different nominee? We don't want Biden to lead the Democratic Party. How many times did he have either Norman Solomon on? 0. Jeff Cohen on? 0. He other individuals who he knew would be advocating for an open primary. Jake Tapper did not do that at all. So, I mean,
why do you think he didn't do that? I mean, is it the powers that be? Was it his editorial decision?
No, it's him. He could have, again, any one of these people that have power, like an anchor who's been there for so many years, has a lot of influence over who the guests are, who's going to be on the panel. That's Jake Tapper's decision not to include in 2023 or early 2024 anyone questioning why isn't there an open primary in the Democratic Party. He had that right. He had that power. He didn't do it. You raised something that FAIR has been very, very good about, which is letting people know the background of the guest experts, so-called, the panelists that got on over and over and over. And they are always introduced by their last government position, even if their last government position was 5, 10, 15 years ago. So I wrote a column about CNN in 2020 when they kept bringing on a guy to attack. His job was to come on and attack Bernie Sanders.
Mm-hmm.
And his name was Jim Messina, not the singer. Jim Messina, he's a consultant for corporations. He's a communications expert. And he used to be he was once the campaign manager for Obama. He was once like deputy chief of staff or chief of staff for Obama. And that's how he got introduced, even though that was years and years ago. He did not get introduced as Mr. Messina is the president and owner of a consulting corporate communications consulting firm, and their clients include Uber, Delta Airlines, the pharmaceutical division of Amazon, et cetera, et cetera. That's the proper way to introduce someone like that who's coming on, and you're bringing him on to bash Bernie Sanders. If he had been properly introduced, people would have said, oh, I get it. Bernie Sanders is probably the most articulate critic of corporate greed. And this guy who's from the corporate sector is attacking him. That makes sense. But they bring him on and say, Obama, he's an Obama person. He was an Obama campaign manager. They're lying to you. And it happens all the time. These former State Department leaders, the former Defense Department officials, the retired generals and admirals, they may have retired or left government 8, 10, 12, 20 years ago, and they still just get introduced as General McCaffrey. Well, General McCaffrey has been a consultant for military contractors ever since, which is one reason he's so pro-war. And if he were properly introduced by the news media on these, I'm talking about NPR, PBS, the mainstream TV, commercial TV networks, if these people were properly introduced, the viewers and listeners would be able to better understand why this discussion is going the way it has. So my number one lesson to news consumers today is when you hear someone introduced as a former, the news media are generally lying to you. They know that this former official is currently a corporate consultant, a corporate lobbyist, a corporate board member, and that's how they should be introduced if you're to understand where they're coming from today, not what they were doing 12, 15, 20 years ago.
But what do you make of, I mean, because these people, you know, it's so funny because they're lobbying for people whose commercials lead into their segments. And it's just,
yeah.
I just don't.
Who's the main funder of television news? It's the pharmaceutical industry.
So you couldn't even have a discussion about our medicines and the mandates. Part of the dirty little secret about what's happened with the air traffic controllers is that so many of them left because of the medicinal mandates.
Right.
I mean, this is real, everybody. I mean, I'm just saying, do what you will, but we're shutting down discussions. And to me, I'm just trying to figure out what all of this is supposed to mean. Coming up, we're going to have Colleen Rowley, former, FBI whistleblower, as we talk about James Comey and 8647. You know, I was trying to figure out what all that was about. And that is a horror. You know, you don't have to like anybody, everybody. You don't. But you don't call for someone's assassination, and don't act like the FBI hasn't done it. They did it to Dr. King on a regular.
Yeah.
So I'm, you know, and I'm just seeing, I think that the dirty part is being said out loud about everything, Jeff Cohen.
Yeah.
I mean, because this is the way Democratic Party, and quite frankly, Democratic Party in particular, they have functioned this way for a long time.
Yeah.
They have someone pre-selected, or if you have someone like a Jesse Jackson, and I'm not talking about my dad now, everybody. I'm talking about Bernie Sanders, someone organic who pops up from the people. And when they come in and they start winning, they upset the whole process, right? Isn't that what you saw, Jeff Cohen? I mean, we've seen this before.
We've seen it over and over. They're afraid of the progressive instincts of working class people, of people of color, and young people. That scares the hell out of the ruling elites, is that this progressive instinct, this is a wealthy country, let's share some of that wealth. This is a country that's got so much going for it. Let's protect the environment, especially in communities of color that bear the brunt of environmental racism and environmental pollution. That instinct.
And in Appalachia with poor white people.
Yeah, of course. And your dad, had built a rainbow coalition that included white working class and white poor people. But I mean, those are the instincts that are the majority instincts in our country. If we had a full and fair debate, if we had a democratic process, that progressive sentiment would be allowed to flourish. I mean, I know when Jesse Jackson was in the race, all of a sudden ideas were being discussed that had not ever been discussed before, because a candidate was winning primaries and saying things that no one in the mainstream media was saying, like Jesse's talked about, you have to negotiate with the Palestinian people and the Palestinian, the PLO. And, Bernie Sanders got the whole country thinking about Medicare for all. The mainstream media doesn't want that talked about. They're in league with the health insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies.
Wait a minute, while they were trying to send Bernie Sanders' wife to jail.
Remember?
Yes. I'm sorry, I have to put all that stuff out there. Because while he's running under that kind of threat, this is an educator who's hurt no one.
Right.
And this,
Yeah. Again, yeah, I mean, the hope we have, I know you share it, is we actually believe that if there was a democratic political process that allowed for a real Democratic Party in a media system that was more diverse and was not controlled by a few giant conglomerates, we have the hope, we have the belief that in a truly democratic process, working people, the majority of people, would win. And we don't have that democratic process. We don't have a democratic media system. I mean, look at what's happened in the media. And some of these candidates, some of these owners used to donate to Democrats. This is the point you and I made at the beginning of this hour, how some of these donors, they don't particularly care. Think about Mark Zuckerberg of Meta and Facebook. Think about Jeff Bezos of Amazon. I mean, these guys were always in both parties. And the minute Trump won, all of a sudden they're front row at the Trump inauguration. They're making trips to Mar-a-Lago. They all gave at least $1 million. These media moguls, these tech moguls gave at least $1 million to the Trump inauguration. And now they're all in with Trump. And I think it's fascinating, when I try to get people to pay more attention to the Santita Jackson show or to Democracy Now! Or commondreams.org or Truth Out or independent media in general. The reason is you can't trust a media system that's owned by these guys. I mean, think about it if you worked at CBS today and you know that the owner of CBS is Paramount, and Paramount is about to settle its suit, a harassment suit, a frivolous Trump lawsuit, saying, about this, how 60 Minutes edited the Kamala Harris interview. Mm-hmm. That can't possibly win in court. Every lawyer alive knows that can't win in court. And Paramount, which owns CBS, is about to settle that case by giving millions of dollars to Trump's library or whatever. And then on the day that happens, the Trump administration will give final approval to the Paramount merger. And on that day, the boss of Paramount will be nearly $2 billion richer than she is today. We're seeing this kind of corruption. And the head of 60 Minutes left. because of the intervention from the bosses. So what people don't know about mainstream media is that when you have a few conglomerates that own it, the people that work in it are in a constant state, those who have ethics, those who are actual journalists, who want to investigate the real issues. They're constantly worried what's going to happen now. And 60 Minutes is one of the most, not just one of the most profitable news shows in history. It's perhaps the most profitable TV show in history. And there was so much intervention that the executive producer had to resign in protest. So if 60 Minutes isn't powerful enough to stand up to corporate conglomerate pressure from their bosses, imagine if you're just a reporter at CNN or a producer, or you work for a daily newspaper, and you know who your bosses are, and you know all your bosses care about is enriching their bottom line. That's the problem we have with corporate conglomerated media. It's why I'm such a big fan of independent news outlets.
So where do we go from here? Because I'm not here, because the corporate media, they're certainly not. I'm not asking them to flagellate themselves. I'm not asking them to do that. They take that Christ walk people take during the Easter season. No fun, no pun intended, because I am Christian and I take that seriously. Right. I'm not asking for self-flagellation, though, but self-reflection.
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm seeing all CNN is they're publicizing this as this blockbuster book, and it is, but they were complicit.
Yeah. But CNN has been complicit in most of the horrible policies that have been wrecking our country and the world. And the one they're most complicit in that comes to my mind is the genocide in Gaza. That you've got anchors like Jake Tapper and Dana Bush that are just, Dana Bash, are horrible on that issue.
And Wolf Blitzer.
Pardon me?
And Wolf Blitzer.
Yeah, Wolf Blitzer is even better than those two, but not saying much. Dana Bash isn't sure there's an Israeli occupation of Palestinian land. Someone used the phrase occupation and she questioned it. Jake Tapper smeared Rashida Tlaib when Rashida accurately, we know how accurate it was, Rashida was questioning, why is the Attorney General in Michigan prosecuting so harshly the anti-genocide protesters at University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, who were standing up for Palestinian survival? And she, in prior incidents of political civil disobedience, you know, the prosecutions had been slap on the wrist and then, you know, you get out of your detention. But with this, she was really going crazy, the Attorney General of Michigan. And Rashida said, it raises the issue of bias. Why this group of civil disobedience so harshly, and like the Black Lives Matter people were not prosecuted that harshly. And Rashida, the Congresswoman Tlaib, raised this really important question of bias within the prosecutor's office and the Attorney General's office. And Jake Tapper says that Rashida Tlaib had questioned the Attorney General because she's Jewish. It had nothing to do with the Attorney General being Jewish. And Jake Tapper just went and then he started pressing the governor of Michigan. This is Jake Tapper live with the governor of Michigan. Don't you think you should say something about Rashida Tlaib questioning that the Attorney General is Jewish? It's something Rashida had never, ever done. So, I mean, again, you cannot trust corporate mainstream media. You can't trust them, whether it's right-wing Fox News or allegedly baby step to the left of center MSNBC. they all have these same constraints. They have these same huge corporate sponsors led by the pharmaceutical industry, the oil and gas industry, the health insurance industry. These industries are not benign. They're political. They throw their weight around. They have hundreds and hundreds of lobbyists, thousands of lobbyists. And that's why I'm such a big proponent of independent media. And if you want to end on a hopeful note, mm-hmm. independent media are growing. Yeah. Whether it's ethnic media, whether it's community radio, mm-hmm. Independent news is growing because, I mean, again, on your show, you talked about why Biden should not run when it might have mattered. And so much independent news got it right. They kept questioning. Biden said he's a transitional president. He's doing so poorly in the polls. Young people don't want him to run again. Democrats don't want him again. Why is he running again? I heard that debate only in independent news outlets. And so that's my hope, is that people will turn off corporate mainstream media, turn on independent news. And the other thing, besides supporting independent shows and independent news outlets, is joining organizations. You can't do it alone. You know, if you're alone consuming the horrible things that are going on under Trump and Musk and the rest of them, and you're not in an organization, you're really going to have personal despair, mental issues, emotional issues. You need to form organizations. We need groups like Rainbow Push. We need groups like rootsaction.org. Join your NAACP. Join your Jewish Voice for Peace. All of the groups whose leaders
if
you
not
have on
now.
Yeah.
If not now. Care. All
yeah, care. There are all of these groups. If you're in despair at what's happening and that the Democrats are not putting up enough opposition, join the organizations that are pressuring the Democrats to be a real opposition party. And so that's my advice, is support independent programming, support independent news platforms, and then join independent progressive organizations. That's our only hope for the future. We can't rely on the traditional media. We can't rely on the former Democratic Party leaders. They need to be replaced. And you know, young people are active. This movement to protect the Palestinian people from genocide was largely a youth movement. Mm-hmm. As you know, Santita, my daughter was one of those arrested with Jewish Voice for Peace by the escalator at Trump Tower, mm-hmm. after the Trumpites had kidnapped a leader of the Columbia protests in support of Palestinians. And he was known, he's a Muslim, he was known as someone who was beloved by his Jewish colleagues, his fellow Jewish students. And this is the guy who's now incarcerated.
And he's also a world-renowned scholar. I mean, yes. You know, he's like got the equivalent of a Fulbright or Rhodes Scholar. Yes. That's why he's here.
And all of these people that have been kidnapped, one for writing an op-ed, co-writing a column in the Tufts student newspaper. There's not an anti-Semite. They don't hate Jews. They're all working with Jewish students and Muslim students and Christian students and atheist students. All of these people that have been kidnapped by ICE mm-hmm. are in a multi-ethnic, multi-religious coalition. And this it's one of the biggest hoaxes going on now, is that the students who've been involved trying to protect the people of Gaza from the violence and from the embargo of humanitarian aid, that somehow they're motivated by hating Jews. I'll leave you with this one comment. Mm-hmm. When I opposed the apartheid government of South Africa and called for a boycott, no one accused me of hating all white people. When I've criticized the government of China, no one said, oh, you're an anti-Chinese or anti-Asian bigot. When I've criticized either Iraq or Iran or Saudi Arabia government. No one said you're an Islamophobe. But the Israel right or wrong crowd has been able to work a trick, which is if you criticize Israel, it can't be because Israel's violent or racist or genocidal or expansionist. It must be because you hate Jews, even if you're Jewish. So, I mean, and by the way, Jake Tapper and Dana Bash and CNN, they've been part of that hoax. Chuck Schumer's been part of that hoax. It doesn't matter how many Jewish people and Jewish students join these protests to protect Gaza. We're having people deported and detained as alleged anti-Semites because they've criticized Israel. It's a hoax. When you criticize a state, that doesn't mean you hate all people who have that either religion or color or nationality. It's utterly insane. But the Israel right or wrong crowd can't have a debate. They couldn't have one when Reverend Jackson was running for president. They had to suppress. And if there was a full, fair debate about the Middle East, our policy would change like that. So the Israel right or wrong crowd has to intimidate, harass, and now they've moved into a complete alliance with Trump. And it's something that people should be ashamed of.
And Americans do it too.
Yeah, no doubt.
Because I love our country, and I criticize it because I love it.
Right, and it's not because you hate all Americans. But again, they've been able to perpetrate this hoax with regard to Israel, that if you criticize Israel, even if you're Jewish, that means you hate Jews. It's insane.
It's because I'm your friend.
Right.
I see, my father would say, I see you going down a road that is destructive.
Yes.
And so,
yes.
You know what? I'm going to wrap this up. And Norman, I cannot wait to have you back on the show, because guess what? We need you more than ever.
I appreciate it.
More than ever.
I appreciate it. We need you.
Action. Oh, we need you. Everybody get involved with Roots Action. Get involved with Roots Action. They need you. We need them. And we hope, I'm going to reach out to you about our Rainbow Push International Conference. Need to get you involved in that. I know it's coming around very quickly, but we're trying to move because we got a lot of things going on. June 12th through the 14th here in Chicago. I'm going to reach out to you, Jeff Cohen and Norman Solomon, and all of my people, because all of our people, because we all need to come together, because we're not alone, everybody. The majority of Americans think as we do.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
Sending you much love. I love you, Jeff Cohen.
Bye-bye. Keep up the great work. Love you.
You do that.
All right,
all right, everybody. Coming up, we have got Colleen Rowley of the FBI, well, formerly of the FBI, talking about 8647. What did James Comey, the former director, mean? Back in just a moment.